leadership was in a meeting with our management the other day, and just the games they try to play. But knowing your contract, knowing the rules, knowing the regulations is going to make sure that none of that happens.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We've got Matthew Fulone, a member of CWA Local 3905, representing AT&T workers here in Huntsville. Matt, appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure, Jacob. Glad you had me.
Absolutely. And you are a steward at that local, right? Presumably?
I am. Yep. So I'm a steward, and I'm also the organizer of our local. Correct.
Okay. Great. So you are going to be with co-host Adam Keller facilitating 2 workshops today as people are listening, but a couple days as we're recording. 2 workshops, the first being the legal rights of union stewards, and then the second being using grievances to build power. And so we will go with the first one first, which is the legal rights of union stewards, and just we'll start off with an overview of what people can expect if they were able to attend this. You know, maybe some people are listening to this later, but also for the people who aren't able to attend and are listening live. What would you expect from this workshop, the legal rights of union stewards?
So basically, when it comes to union stewards, we are given special status by law due to the NLRA, which basically says, as a steward, we are in any sort of a capacity when it comes to meeting with management, the employer, the bosses. We are their equal. So even though you may just be a regular old worker, if you walk into a meeting with management for any reason, whether it's to represent somebody, whether it's contract negotiations, bargaining, stuff like that, you are at the same level. So I could walk in, you said AT&T, I work for DirecTV, I work in a call center. I can walk into a meeting with the site director, the top guy in that building, and he and I are equal at that meeting. So those are the legal rights that stewards are given due to the NLRA.
And so what does that, and I guess we should even, maybe it would even be good to go back and just a little bit and ask what is a steward even?
So a steward is a representative of the local or the union. So what we do is, we're kind of, I wouldn't say the middleman, but we are the representatives of all the members of the union. So if it comes to, disciplinary meetings, any sort of an issue that arises within the workplace, it is our job to, take those concerns, those issues, those complaints, and bring them to management and make sure that management is hearing our voices and making sure that things are being accomplished, so that every single employee isn't having to run into the manager's office. So what a steward will do, we work on grievances. We represent agents when they're in disciplinary meetings. One of the most important parts of a steward, in my opinion, as I'm an organizer as well, and we'll go over that a little bit later, is also making sure that the workplace is organized so that we are hearing the complaints, making sure that we understand what's happening. In my opinion, that's probably the most important part of what we do.
Right. And so, going back to the legal rights, you said, you have these abilities to have meetings, whether they're grievance procedures or a disciplinary meeting or, contract negotiations, all of these things, you've got a kind of special status that places you more on par with the employer in those meetings. And one of the important legal rights that union stewards have is, and that members have the ability to call on their union stewards, is Weingarten rights. Can you talk to us about what those are?
So what the Weingarten rights are They're federally guaranteed rights. And what, in our local, and I'm sure it's the same in many other locals, what we do, when we initiate new membership, we have them posted on the wall wherever you go. What they guarantee is that if any meeting between a worker, a member, any sort of meeting with management, if that meeting can lead to any sort of discipline, they are guaranteed representation by a steward or a member of the union, or a steward mostly. So what we tell our new members and old members that have been around forever, in case they've forgotten, is that any time you are called into a meeting with management, the first question you always ask, without hesitation, is, can this meeting lead to discipline? And if the answer to that question is yes, you have the right then and there to stop that meeting and request representation from a union representative, steward. Those are very important because obviously employers, big corporations, may try to pull fast ones, use scare tactics, stuff like that. So we're there to make sure that everybody is treated equally, fairly, and there's no funny business happening by the bosses.
Right. And so what are some other, are there any other rights that you're going to be talking about in this workshop?
So, basically we're going to be covering those rights when it comes to stewards, not necessarily members, but stewards. So when it comes to those rights, so, like we said, going into a meeting, we're equal. So what that rule also covers, or that law also covers, is behaviors that you may not normally be able to get away with when it comes to your worker boss relationship. So not only are we equals, but we can treat them as such. So if, let's say, the main guy running the meeting, the main boss, the site director, a manager, whatever the case may be, if I feel like they're being condescending or if they're not telling the truth, it's within my right to call them a liar. It's within my right to call them a jackass. It's within my right to do a lot of things that normally would lead to discipline, possibly firing. So stuff like that. So that's what that special status covers. Also, when it comes to, in particular, when we're talking about like grievance procedure, the right to request information is also a very important legal right for stewards. So when you're defending somebody in a matter of discipline, that's not necessarily for me, with this as a steward, but when it comes to like people who are bargaining with the company come contract time, they are also able to request information. So the company has to abide by those rules. So they have to release information to us that is requested, as long as it is, has something to do with the issue that we're talking about. I can't just, we can't just ask some crazy stuff. But what we'll do is make sure with that information, like I said, the main important thing that we make sure when it comes to our members is that everybody's being treated equally and fairly. So when we request information, we can request information from not only that person, but we can request information from everybody in the past, few years that have been disciplined for the same thing or about to be disciplined for the same thing. We can also request information about people who are not bargained employees. So if there's an issue with, say, a specific manager, we're able to request information on them, and then also make sure that when it comes to discipline for managers, they are not being treated any differently than a bargained employee would be. So that, in my opinion, is also one of the more important things, because they have no way to hide that information from us. They have to provide any and all information that we request. Like I said, as long as it's, it has to do with the subject. But that is a huge issue, especially when it comes to grievances, whether or not somebody's been fired or about to be fired or levels added to another step of discipline. It's a very important thing.
Yeah, and so the right to request information, is that enforced through the NLRB? Like if they don't, if I sent as a steward, I send an information request and then they don't, they just ignore it. Is that something that you file a ULP over, and that potentially the NLRB could, compel them to grant?
Absolutely, 100%. So they have to follow those rules and regulations as well. Like I said, I mean, you can't just ask crazy stuff. Um,
Mm.
you can't, be threatening. It has to be something that's pertaining to the issue at hand. But yes, they have to provide that information.
Any other important rights that you think that you're going to be going over during this training?
You know what? I think that's about it. I mean, those are the most important
Hmm.
things. I mean, what we're going to do probably, and we'll probably do the same thing for the other panel as well. But we're also, obviously that room is probably going to be full of stewards. And
Hmm.
one of the most important things, I think, especially, you and I were both at Labor Notes, the big conference. One of the great things about that conference is bringing a lot of people together from different unions. One thing that I learned while I was there is, being a member of the CWA, which is a huge union that's been around for quite a while, there have been rights and stuff that we've won throughout the years, well before I became a member. But there are also smaller unions across the country that are fighting for those very same rights as we speak. So it's good to see and hear from other unions. So that's why we want to, kind of turn it over to everybody in the room, because we're all at the same level, right?
Hmm.
Just to see how everybody else is doing and hopefully learn, a different way of going about things just by hearing what other people do in certain situations that you may not have thought of. Stuff that we can do in the future, in a certain situation like a grievance, that you're beating your head up against the wall with a specific manager. Maybe somebody else has a different suggestion.
Right.
So that's one of the good things that we're hoping to accomplish while we're at that panel.
Yeah, and so this is it's a training about the legal rights of union stewards, but Labor Notes is not generally known for its, you know, um, for its emphasis on legalistic measures, right? And so there's some different undertones there's going to be some different undertones to this training, as opposed to just, this is the law and you need to know the law and the law will protect you, and all that. There are reasons that it's important to understand what your rights are as a union steward, so that you can better represent your fellow workers, and so that you can better organize your fellow workers. What are some of the reasons to understand your rights, given by the law, and then also, other potentially ancillary rights in your contract that are beyond the law? What are, why should a steward know those, and know those kind of like the back of their hand? And how will knowing those help them to better organize their fellow workers?
So yeah, so that's the most important part. We keep that in mind. We in our local, when it comes to stewards, our vice president always states he knows our contract like the back of his hand. So the
Mm.
contract is the most important thing, because contracts vary. What one union deals with, maybe another one doesn't. But knowing the contract, knowing the rules, can only mean that you're going to represent your member better.
Hmm.
Not to say that all companies do it on purpose, but I'm sure a lot of them do. Whether or not the management knows the rules, the regulations, the contract, or whether or not they are, trying to play games to see what they can get away with. We were in a meeting. Our leadership was in a meeting with our management the other day, and just the games that they try to play. But knowing your contract, knowing the rules, knowing the regulations is going to make sure that none of that happens. And you can make sure uh, that if you continually demonstrate that you know that rule, that regulation, that law, the company that you work for, or the union, or what your union, who your union is dealing with, they're not going to try to play those games any longer because they know they're going to be caught. So, like I said, not to say that they're doing it, whether it's intentional or not intentional. Most companies historically are going to try to play those games to see what they can get away with.
Right. And how does knowing these rights and being able to enforce them, how does that help you organize your members?
Well, the membership is going to be happy when you can, present them with victories, in situations. So, if you're continually, losing employees, or people are being disciplined for things, and, you're going into grievances and you're never winning, they're going to lose faith. But if you go into a meeting and you're continually producing results, it makes it a lot easier to get everybody excited about what the union can do. It's ironic. Probably a couple of weeks ago, we had an issue with DirecTV at our call center, where contractually we are paid every 2 weeks. It's how it always is. It's how it always will be. That's our contract. In the call center, we have what we call an incentive. So it's a monthly incentive. It's basically a bonus. It's dependent upon your results, right? So not necessarily every other week, but that week we were supposed to get our bonus check. So there was supposed to be our regular 40-hour check and then our bonus. So the bonuses can range anywhere between $500 to $1,000, depending. It could be less, could be a little bit more. So it's a significant chunk of money, right? And this bonus check fell on the 29th of the month. So it was a Friday, it was the 29th. What comes up on the first, rent, bills. So people are dependent upon that money. We already know what we're supposed to get. So people know what their check is supposed to be like. So a lot of people have direct deposit. Depending on what type of bank you have, you may get that direct deposit notification on a Wednesday. So on a Wednesday, people were starting to hit us up, whether it be my phone or Facebook page that we use. But a lot of people were starting to say, hey, this isn't looking right. So, a couple of the guys within the union, myself and a few others, we started to look into it, discover what the issue was. And what we found out was that the bonus was not included in that check. So like I said, $500, $1,000 could it be, so obviously that's not going to make anybody happy. So what we immediately did, we heard the complaints of the membership, immediately started making phone calls, making emails. But what we also did is made sure that each individual agent was either sending emails to their direct supervisor and then CCing that with their supervisor, so that the company was aware that we were aware that there was something wrong. And that pressure that we organized within our membership got the results that we wanted. So within probably a couple hours, and this has happened in the past with certain things, and it's always, I'm sure it's the same thing with a lot of other companies. We'll get you on the next check. We'll make it up to you. So we weren't going to allow that to happen. We made them aware that we were not going to allow that to happen. So within a few hours, we got an email from the higher ups stating that they were aware of the issue, and that there was going to be a second off-cycle check cut. We were going to get it on the same day. So the pressure that we were able to organize within our membership, we believe, is what forced their hand to make sure that money came at the proper time. And in my opinion, although it was a bad thing because it was a stressful situation for a lot of people, because they didn't know what was going to happen. But we, as a union, used that power, that pressure, to organize and make sure people were aware of the power of our union. And we were able to demonstrate that, and it made everybody happy.
Right.
So that instance, I'm sure, we got 100 requests to join the Facebook page. People patting us on the back. So in the call center we work at, it's work from home. So organizing is tough now. So we use the Facebook page as one of our main things, and for a significant amount of people to request to join that Facebook page makes us a much stronger union.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.